Welcome back as we continue with section 10.6, Solve Quadratic Equations by the Quadratic Formula. We have covered various ways to solve quadratic equations, and now we add another method to solve quadratic equations. And that method is the quadratic formula. The quadratic formula is used to solve or find solutions of the quadratic equation ax squared plus bx plus c. And we have seen this equation many of times, and the quadratic formula is this guy in the red, where these letters correspond to the letters in the quadratic equation, where a cannot be 0 because if a was 0, we wouldn't have a quadratic equation, and b squared minus 4ac has to be greater than or equal to 0, and you'll see why in a little bit. But first, we are going to start by finding a, b, and c of the quadratic equation. Remember, the quadratic equation is this guy right here in the blue, where the a is in front of the x squared. Well, here, what's in front of the x squared is 2. So a will be 2. B is attached to the x, so b here will be negative 3, and c is 6. For number 2, a is going to be negative 3, b will be 4, and c, well, is there a c? Is there a constant? No, there is no number that is added to the 4x, so c is just going to be 0. Now, let's actually see the quadratic formula in motion. So the question here is, what is the solution to this equation? First, we have to find our a, b, and c. And our a is 3, our b is 5, and our c is negative 8. And I'm going to change the color here and plug these numbers into the quadratic formula over here in the red. So we have opposite b. Opposite b is going to be negative 5 plus minus the square root of b squared, which is 5, minus 4 times a, which was 3, and c, which was negative 8. And remember that it's all over 2 times 3. Now, all we have to do is simplify. We still have negative 5 plus minus the square root of 25. Now it's going to be a plus because it's a negative and a negative times each other. We multiply all this stuff and get plus 96 all over 6. We're going to simplify some more to get negative 5 plus minus the square root of 121 all over 6. We simplify again. What's the square root of 121? Well, we get negative 5 plus minus, and the square root of 121 is 11 all over 6. Now we could leave this as an answer, but we have a plus and a minus, so that means we're going to have two different kind of answers, and I'm going to change the color of my pen for these two different kind of answers. Purple for one, where I have negative 5 plus 11 all over 6, where it is 6 over 6 equals 1. So one answer is going to be 1, and the other answer is going to be negative 5 minus 11 all over 6, and that equals negative 16 all over 6, which simplifies to negative 8/3. And so x in this situation equals negative 8/3 and 1. So there are your two solutions for this equation. Let's try another one. Now we're going to round our solution to the nearest hundredth if necessary. Well, first we have to look at our guy. X squared minus 8x equals 16. Is that in the form of this blue guy over here? It is not. We have to get this 16 over to the other side. How do I get it over to the other side? I add it to the other side, so I have x squared minus 8x plus 16 equals 0. And now we are ready to go. So my a is in front of my x squared. There is no number, but there is 1x squared, so I know my a is just 1. My b is going to be -8, and now here in this equation, this new equation up top, my c is going to be 16. Again, I plug all my numbers into my red formula, into the quadratic formula over here. So it's opposite b. The opposite of b is 8 plus minus the square root of -8 squared minus 4 times a times c, all over, we cannot forget, all over 2 times 1. And that simplifies to 8 plus minus the square root. Remember, this is a -8 squared. Be careful when you punch it into your calculator. -8 times -8 is a positive 64 minus 4 times 16 is 64 all over 2. We simplify this to be 8 plus minus the square root of 0. 64 minus 64 is 0 all over 2. And then we keep going with this. Well, what's the square root of 0? Is just 0. We don't even need to show that. So it's 8 over 2. 8 divided by 2 simplifies to 4. So in this situation, we just have one answer, and our answer is x equals 4. And now let's try one more guy. Number 5, 2x squared minus 7 equals x. Is it in the quadratic equation? Is it in the same form as this blue guy over here? It is not. So again, we have to rearrange our equation to make it look like this guy. And I'm going to rearrange it as 2x squared, and I'm going to subtract the x over, so it's going to be minus x minus 7. I'm going to put that minus x in between the 7 and the 2x just because we're used to seeing it in that order. So again, let's go ahead and name our a, b, and c. Our a is 2, our b is a -1, and our c is a -7. Let's use our quadratic formula to find our solutions. So again, we have opposite b, so we have 1 plus minus the square root of -1 squared minus 4 times a, which is 2, and times c, which is -7, all over 2 times a, which is 2. Simplifies to 1 plus minus the square root of, we have to be careful when we square a negative, so it's -1 squared is 1 minus 4 times 2 times -7. Remember, all over 2a, which is 4. This simplifies to 1 plus minus the square root of 1 plus 56 all over 4. Simplifying one more time to get 1 plus minus the square root of 57 all over 4. Again, we have a plus and a minus, a square root. But the square root of 57 doesn't really turn out nice for us. The square root of 57 turns into 7.55, so I'm going to make this 2 guys over here, so it's going to be 1 plus 7.55 all over 4, so we add that up, and that gives us, punch it into your calculator, 2.1375, and our other guy is where we subtract, where it's 1 minus 7.55 divided by 4. We add that up, divide by 4, and it's going to give us a negative 1.6375. So our two answers for this equation is 2.1375 and negative 1.6375. And now for our last example, again, we have to rewrite this equation into a general quadratic equation. So I'm going to move these two guys over to get 4z squared minus 5z plus 2. So now our a, b, and c are, or a is 4, b is -5, c is 2. Again, we are going to plug these letters into our quadratic formula for the last time, and we get opposite b, which is 5 plus minus the square root of -5 squared minus 4 times 4 times 2, and I'm going to extend this square root a little bit farther. Don't forget about 2 times 4 on the bottom. Simplifies to get 5 plus minus the square root of 25 minus 32 all over 8. Keep going to get 5 plus minus the square root of -7 all over 8. Now we simplify this, but wait, can we simplify this? Look very closely right here. Can we have the square root of a -7? Can we have a square root of a negative number? No, we cannot. So since that square root is a negative number, we have no solution. And that does it for 10.6. Have a great rest of your day.